is kind of handling children, and thought that it would be nice to. We thought that it would be nice to kind of share things that I have found. I've got over 20 years of early childhood experience. My family and I, we have a preschool in Allen called Wisteria Preschool. So kind of, really understand the challenges of the early childhood education system, as well as I've got 2 kids of my own, so I'm very familiar with what that's like. So today what we're going to be talking about is kind of the art of flexible teaching, right? And we do that so that we can have deeper connection and create learning experiences that really stick. My background is in addition to early childhood, emotional intelligence is something that I'm very passionate about. And so I develop a lot of curriculum for that. I do a lot of parent and teacher workshops related to that. And the premise of, kind of emotional intelligence is a word that you guys might be familiar with. And often people just think it's fluff, or they think that, well, it's a nice to have. Well, I'm here to tell you that emotional intelligence is something that we can really change the trajectory for our children with. What I mean by that is that early, when we start introducing emotional intelligence at an early age, we kind of make that a second language for them, right? So I always give this example. We want our children to know letters, numbers, shapes, and we want to introduce it early on, right? We don't wait till 5th grade or 10th grade to introduce those concepts. We do it early on because we want to create a strong foundation. My mission and vision with what I do is to introduce emotional literacy early on, so that we give children an advantage, so that they are comfortable identifying emotions, feeling them, talking about them, and using them to build synergistic relationships. And so the first thing is, let's start out with a definition, because we hear things and it's often like, okay, what does that really mean? Well, emotional intelligence is the ability to be attuned to your own feelings and to the feelings of those around you, to create synergistic and healthy relationships. And the sad thing is, why this is important or why this is relevant is because if you think about any major world event, right? The worst of headlines and the best of headlines. If you strip through everything else, it starts with emotion. That's what it really comes down to, right? When we go to war, it's based on emotion. When we decide to be peaceful, it's based on emotion. When we decide to do great community work, it's based on emotion. So imagine that we have this tool at our hand that if we don't learn to use well, we risk raising a generation that is going to have emotions that they don't know how to control. They're much more susceptible to depression, to anxiety, to substance abuse, to loneliness. And let's learn some basics so that we kind of give them an advantage at knowing how to handle it. So are any of you familiar, with the term neuroplasticity? Anybody know what that is? Don't be shy. Kind of, sort of. Anybody? I see Maria smiling.
Is it like, okay, the way that I am free, please tell me I am wrong, that it's like the way you kind of like mentally bounce back. Like the response time, kind of.
Yes, you're on the right vein, exactly. So neuroplasticity, I like to introduce by first kind of talking about the term malleable, right? We've all heard the term malleable. We think about it in terms of metal, right? What's malleable? Meaning that you can hammer something, you can play around with it, you can make something out of it without breaking it. That's what malleability is. And neuroplasticity, if you think about it, it refers to the brain's malleability, the ability that it can adapt, it can change to the environment around it. And based on early experiences, based on relationships, based on the environment, it can really be molded into, sometimes we can guide it towards where we want it to be. Now, neuroplasticity for us as educators or caregivers or parents means that there is so much that we can do. But the key is to be doing it in the right way, right? And that's where the idea of understanding a little bit about the brain. The brain is malleable. And how do we build, or how do we create good habits, or how do we, create that? We do that by creating neural pathways. And repetition allows those neural pathways to be deepened. So if we were doing an in-person workshop, I would have Play-Doh out here for you. That's what I often do for my parent and teacher workshops. I would give you Play-Doh and I would ask you to shape it and kind of think of what a neural pathway would look like. And what repetition does is it deepens that. So often, as parents, we might be frustrated that our child is saying the same thing again and again and again, or repeating the same story again and again and again. And you're like, okay, I'm the 15th time I'm hearing this, right? But every time a child is repeating something, it's solidifying in their mind, right? That's why creating routine is so important. That's why creating structure is so important. It's not just because it makes life easy. We all know that it should be. I think it's important to understand why certain things work. They work at a brain level. When a child has the same routine, it creates structure. It also creates another very important element, which is predictability. When children are not sure of what's going to happen, there's a certain amount of uncertainty which doesn't allow learning to happen in the most optimal way. And think about it. If every day you came home and there was a new routine, one day we're going to come home and we're going to have dinner right away. One day we're actually just going to go for a walk. One day we might just decide to go shopping. Even as adults, we would find that hard. We would find that like, wait a minute, how is this happening? So think about it for children, creating that structure and creating routines that actually help them feel regulated. Regulation, emotional regulation, is a huge part of emotional intelligence. It's what allows for that deep connection to happen. Often, what are we doing? We're picking up our kids from school, or we're working with them if we're in the capacity of a practitioner or a therapist. They're coming to us after a full day. We have an agenda. And we're trying to say, okay, I have an hour to work with you, or I have something else to do, so I want to give you 1 hour. But what's happening? If you are not in a regulated state of mind, the first person around you that's going to notice it is going to be a child. Your boss might not notice, your coworker might not notice, your partner might not notice. Children are extremely perceptive to the mood and the emotions that you bring to the table. So a lot about emotional regulation starts with you. Most of us just want calm, collected, composed children, but that's not possible unless it originates from you. So when we talk about building your calm means that what do you have in place when you're stressed, when you're frustrated, when you're triggered? What do you do? How do you handle that? Because so much of what children are going to learn is not going to be from what we tell them. It's really going to be seeing, how do you behave when you're stressed? How do you behave when things aren't going as planned? So let's say you're running late, right? And we're all guilty of this. I'll be the first one to admit we're running late and now we're speeding. And we're like, oh my God, I'm so late. Oh crap, that person just came in. Oh my God. So a child is sitting back observing this, and they're seeing that when things don't go as planned, this is how it is. We're impatient, we're intolerant, we're cutting people in traffic, we're getting loud, we're being, really short. So to them, okay, that's what we do. And again, not, to give full grace that we're also human. But my point is that we cannot raise emotionally intelligent children without taking account of our own emotions. And that's the part that I guess for most people is tricky, because it's like, well, I just want to know how to do this with the kids. Well, you can't really do this with the kids, because till you don't do it yourself, it's never going to feel natural. And it's not something that we can do once in a while. The thing with kids is they're watching us all the time, right? And they're seeing us at the best of our moments and they're seeing us at the lowest of our moments. But when we have practices, and this is what I encourage parents, caregivers to do, have a plan of first of all, what am I like when I am frustrated? And be honest, right? Like for me, I know that when I am frustrated or when I am, triggered, as the new age word is, I tend to be like in a rush. So I'm talking faster. I'm doing things faster. I'm still being calm in my head. I'm like, I'm not saying anything to anybody. I'm still being really calm. But there's a speed with which I'm working. kind of my facial expression gets a little tight. If I really zoom in and slow down and observe each part of myself, that frustration or that not being in my most regulated space is visible. And who's the first one to notice that? My kids. Mommy, why are you mad? And I'm like, I'm not mad. They're like, yeah, you're mad. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Because what are they picking up on? All those micro facial expressions, that change and shift in energy. So part of this, what I would encourage you to do is ask yourself, what are you like? And then number two, that part of emotional intelligence is called self-awareness. That's becoming aware of who you are, right? That's the foundation of emotional intelligence. And that is the most uncomfortable part. Let me tell you that. It's much more fun to be able to tell other people what's wrong and work with our kids and talk about, it's all about technology and blame other aspects. But that's the part that you take stock of, is ask yourself, what parts of me am I really proud of and how I show up when I'm working with kids or with children? And what parts of myself am I not so great at? What parts can I really work on? And from there, ask yourself, what do I do? So when I do like teacher workshops or teacher trainings, staff training, I'll ask teachers, hey, what do you do when you're getting really like the class is out of control? You've got a kid that's not listening. And first of all, what does that feel like? And they'll like, I've had teachers be like, well, I feel my blood pressure rising, or I feel like I'm starting to do shallow breathing, or I feel like I'm getting my tone is great. Let's recognize that. No shame there. Let's be honest, right? We do that. That's first step. Number two, the self-management piece of emotional intelligence is, okay, I know this happens. What do I do when it happens? What works for me? Like what replenishes me? What helps regulate me? And for each of you, it's going to be different, right? Like for me, that deep breath helps, right? Drinking something cold helps. For some people, like literally I've had teachers say, like, I'll just have to say a prayer. I want to just step aside for a moment and just kind of, I'll say a prayer and that helps to bring me back to normal. Why is this important? Well, it's important because when we make these things part of our plan, it's like having a drill. Do we do, like, what's the purpose of doing fire drills? We do them because we follow this procedure. And so God forbid when something happens, everyone knows what to do. We've practiced this enough times. That's the purpose of having these things in place, that these are things I can do when I'm in that state of mind. I also want to spend some time talking to you guys about understanding parts of the brain. Not to turn this into a science lesson, because that's definitely not my forte, but I want to kind of help you understand a concept that really changed the way I thought about this. Let's divide the brain into the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain, okay? And we're not going to get into scientific fancy names, but the downstairs brain is where you have parts like the amygdala, right? The purpose of the downstairs brain is really to keep us alive. It's that simple. It's there to scan the environment for threat, for danger. It exists to make sure that we pretty much stay alive. So it is picking up on anything that feels unsafe, unknown. From an evolutionary perspective, this part was very, very important. It's what pumps your system with cortisol and adrenaline and gets you into fight or flight. And so if there was a lion showing up, you kind of have to decide in that split second, what are you going to do? Are you going to run? Are you going to hide? What are you going to do? That is what that downstairs brain is meant for. But the downstairs brain is also very, very reactive. It's meant to be reactive. Do you think we make the best decisions when we're in that downstairs brain? Nah, we don't. Then we have the upstairs brain. That's where parts like the prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, these parts exist. What is the purpose of the upstairs brain? That is where decision-making, empathy, compassion, rationality, all of that exists in the upstairs brain. So what are we really trying to do when we're working with kids? We want to develop that upstairs brain, that prefrontal cortex. We want to develop the ability to make good decisions, for ethics, for compassion, kindness. All of that is an upstairs brain function. Now, here's the challenge. Most of us feel that when we are mad, or when we're dealing with kids, and no matter what age they are, we're trying to teach them when they're in their downstairs brain. They've just made a mistake. They're acting up. They're throwing a tantrum. And that's when we're like, hey, do you know that's not, do we sit like that? Do we eat like that? The challenge with engaging with when someone is in their downstairs brain, and this applies for kids and grown-ups, guys, this applies with your partner, with coworkers, with in any part. Recognize that when someone is in their downstairs brain, learning cannot happen. It just physiologically is very hard. The brain is not ready to take on more information. It's basically now in a fight or flight. It's viewing you as a threat. It's feeling attacked. So nothing good comes out of when we are in the downstairs brain. And so I've made this kind of, part of the lingo I use with my own kids. Hey, you look like you're in your downstairs brain. You want to come upstairs? And I've had my 7-year-old give it right back. He's like, I don't. I'm in the basement of my brain and I want to stay there. Fair enough, right? Because part of it, when we're dealing with reactivity, whether it's of our own or of the people around us, right? And I don't want to restrict this to children because a lot of what I'm talking about applies to just human relationships. Understanding that takes away a lot of our own ego and frustration out of it. Realizing that someone now is in a reactive state of mind, they're going to say things and they're going to do things that, are not going to be very mature, sensible, they might be hurtful. That's just the place that they're in. But what are ways that we can make that journey from downstairs to upstairs brain is really what the purpose of education is, emotional intelligence is, education is. The key thing is, when someone is feeling big emotions, a great technique that works is name it to tame it. Okay? What does that mean? That means that I'm in a really bad mood, right? And if you ask me, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just having a rough day. You say, really? Tell me more. What are you feeling? The process of having to identify the emotion literally lowers the pressure on that downstairs part of the brain, the amygdala, and it kicks on the upstairs brain. Because to identify an emotion is a higher level function that taps into the upstairs brain. So even if you look at brain scans and you do these activities, you can literally see that there's that shift in which part suddenly is being used more. Why is that important? Because we want that upstairs brain to come back on. That's where learning happens. That's where regulation happens. That's where the magic happens. But part of our job is to be able to lead the way to the upstairs brain. And here's the thing. You can't lead someone to the upstairs brain when you yourself are not there, right? I can't help someone to the top of the mountain if I'm at the bottom with them. I kind of have to get there myself. And so that's where, we talk about the idea of lending your cortex to the people around you, lending your calm. Lending your cortex means I'm holding space within myself because I'm anchored in my own self and I'm staying calm so that whoever is around me, I'm able to lend them some. But I cannot lend something I don't have. So you developing your cortex, and that's where it goes back to you. And that's kind of, the approach that I take that's slightly different, which is I like to spend a lot of time talking about things that you have to do and work on yourself before just saying, here's things we're going to do with the kid, because anything like that is a shortcut solution. It doesn't work. It's not deeply rooted in you. So response and reaction, that's where, let's talk about that. So reactivity is what happens in the downstairs brain, right? We want to move towards responsiveness. We want to develop children that are responsive. We want to do responsive parenting, not reactive parenting or teaching. That doesn't mean being, just letting kids have their way or not disciplining or just being nonchalant. Quite the opposite. It means that we are able to understand and meet the child where they're at. So let me give you an example. It doesn't mean we're not delivering the same consequences, but it's coming from a different place. It's not coming from a place of anger. It's not coming from a place of our own unprocessed emotion, or because I'm having a rough day, I'm just going to lose it. It's saying, you know what? I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say that you are working with a child in your office, right? and you step out for a bit and you come back and you notice that, this 7-year-old has decided to paint all over your wall. You walk in and needless to say, you're going to be upset, right? And what's the first thing you're going to say? Like, why would you do that? Or why did you? Sure. Now it comes to consequence. You can deliver this consequence in two ways. One is from a place of reactivity, which is, why would you paint on the wall? Do you think we paint on the wall? Do you think that's a smart thing to do? How many times have I told you? The tone, the emotion, all of that is based on reactivity. The consequence might be, you know what? You're not going to be allowed to paint for the next, whatever, week. The challenge with that is that it's coming from a place of you being angry, right? It's coming from a place of ego. Responsiveness would be saying very much the same, delivering the same thing, but it's coming from a different place. Oh, I see that you decided to paint on the wall. Do you think that's something smart? Do you think that, that was a good choice? Why did you do that? Well, I think you really did feel like painting, didn't you? So I think that you enjoy painting, but I don't think that's the place we paint. What do you think would be a fair consequence for this? And depending on the age of the child, obviously, if they're very young, you wouldn't do that. But I'm thinking if it's, older, again, 6 or older, you can involve them in helping see. And you'd be amazed, I see how children naturally will say, yeah, I didn't make a good choice. Or, I know I did that. I think you should take away my paints. Or I think I should be in a timeout. But what you're doing is you're giving them control over a situation in which now they're feeling out of control, first of all, because an adult is now telling them what to do. That again puts them in their downstairs brain. So it's important to realize that when we decide to give children consequences in this fashion, that you're going to do this and da, 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 they're feeling threatened, they're feeling attacked. And now again, we've gone to a reactive state of mind. We want to help them see that their decision to do whatever they did was not necessarily the best choice. And we want to include them in, hey, what do you think would be a fair consequence? I do it with my teenager, and you'd be surprised when he's choosing the consequence with me, there's so much more compliance. It's less of a power struggle because it's not about me telling you what to do. You've done something. We both agree that wasn't the smartest choice. So do you think it's fair that, you lose your phone privileges? Do you think it's fair that you, whatever? Kind of changing that conversation in terms of the energy that it comes with, in terms of the intention that it comes with. So that's that responsive and reactive. And so in any moment, be able to ask yourself, am I reacting right now or am I responding? And how do I know the difference? They feel very different, right? Again, starting to notice how am I breathing? How am I speaking? How am I, what's my energy? Am I more tightened up or am I more relaxed? Because when you're responding, you are in your upstairs brain, so you're coming across as being much more in control. When you're reacting, you're a little off-centered and you will know it. So kind of asking yourself in any situation which one you're doing, and then noticing that in your child as well, right? Again, that upstairs, downstairs brain idea. Any questions so far before I move on to the next part? I know I've been talking a lot of information, so I want to take a break and see if there's any questions for me.
I think what I've seen or been is how do I recover from reacting instead of responding? Kind of at my own wit's end, and then I'm reacting to it with my own frustration. How do I recover from that? To kind of repair that relationship after I lose my cool.
Anita, I love that you used the word repair, because that is the most powerful skill that we can teach our children is repairing. We're all human, right? As parents, we're human, and they're little ones that are also just trying to figure the world out. We will lose our cool. We can talk about all these strategies all day long, but we also have to realize that, there's going to be days that we're going to lose it, and that is okay. The most important question here is what you asked, which is, how do we repair from that? The first and most important way to repair is to model what it looks like when we do slip up. And Anita, if you don't mind me asking, how old are your children?
None of my own, but I am part of the oldest of my cousins set, and I have helped with my cousins from 2 to the oldest is 16 now. But I know
Okay.
as a cousin, I kind of step in and I take the kids for a weekend sometimes.
That's really nice, by the way. I like that. I wish I had cousins like that watching my kids. Um, so first thing is to acknowledge it, own it. Hey, you know what? I lost it over there. I didn't, I was feeling really frustrated. I was having a rough day and I didn't, I think I spoke a little too loudly or I didn't, I didn't behave in the best way there. I'm not very proud of myself right now. Own it. As parents, as adults, that is something that we miss. So we expect children to know how to repair, but we've never shown them what that looks like. So give yourself time to cool down because when you're back in your kind of cortex, you're back in your upstairs brain, and the child also gets time to be, kind of regulate, use that moment to connect, get close and say, hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. Earlier today, I kind of lost my cool. And I think, I was just having a rough day and I think I was just a little overwhelmed. And I'm sorry for what I said, or I'm sorry that I wasn't being the most patient with you. That is the most powerful thing you can do because you're showing your child that it is okay. And you're also showing them how it is that we can use this moment to kind of reconnect. And also for them to practice empathy. When I have this conversation with kids, I'll notice how they look at you and they give you grace that even adults struggle in giving each other. They'll be like, that's okay. Or, don't, it's so fine, I understand. Or they'll try to comfort you in their own way. And that is powerful. That you're giving them the power, you're giving them some control in showing that, hey, we're all human and we're all on the receiving end of other people's moods sometimes. So repairing, I think that's a great question that you asked, Anita. Make sure that you repair after you slip up. Don't just move on and act like nothing happened because children that grow up around that, they think it's okay for big things to happen. There's no closure. There's no repair. Everyone just moves on like nothing happens. So they never learn how to handle conflict, how to have those difficult conversations. Make it easy. I try to be very conscious about doing this with my own kids. And the other day I got into something with my teenager and I just kind of, went into I started doing my own thing and he came to me and he said, I think we need to have a mature conversation. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I think it's important that we talk about what happened. And I think that you also need to take some responsibility, and I also need to take some responsibility for what happened. That was him showing me repair, right? That things didn't go as planned. This is how we can kind of set the stage to have a healthy conversation. Did that answer that, Anita? Did that help?
Yes, it did. Because I know sometimes, like when I'm in the heat of it, I get very defensive. Because like I know, to me, I understand why I said what I did. I was mad. It was this. You were doing this. You were doing that, and so sometimes it's hard to like reflect in like I'm wrong too.
I know it's always hard to admit that, right? And yet when we do it, it's so liberating because suddenly now we're not being driven by ego. We're not being driven by, all these other things. So I think being able to just say that is so good. And then we're also normalizing it for our kids that we're all human. We are going to mess up. Let's acknowledge the emotion. Let's talk about the emotion. I was frustrated. I was feeling really sad. I was really mad. I want to talk about now an important little aspect here, which seems small, but there's a whole workshop that, is built around it. The difference in mad and sad, right? Children, if they're younger, typically will just, or even adults, to be honest, will stick with, yeah, I'm just feeling mad or I'm feeling sad is a harder one. But I want you to realize that mad is often just a big, strong gatekeeper for sad. When you're working with kids and you notice them acting up, they're not being, they're being defiant or they're not listening and you're just going to be like, yeah, I don't know what you're so mad about. Often that child is sad about something and no one really teaches us how to deal with sadness. But mad is something that's easy to do because we're not vulnerable when we're mad. We feel strong, right? You're yelling, you're acting up, you're whatever. Society makes it more acceptable to express mad, then it teaches us to be comfortable with being sad, right? And that is where, from a young age, I feel we want to make sure we're helping children work through that. When I see a child that's struggling, or when I'll have a teacher at our school say, "Hey, this kid's just been," and when I talk to them, after we've played and connected, I'll be like, "Hey, sometimes I feel really sad," and I'll say something that really makes me sad. Right? I feel really sad when no one plays with me, or I feel really sad when my friends, are mean to me. What are you sad about? What are things that make you sad? And obviously, it'll take a while. There needs to be trust, all of that. But when you start asking those questions, you realize that the questions you ask will determine the answers you get. We're often not even asking the right questions. Oh, how do you feel? Was it fun? Right? It assumes that everything has to be fun. And when you say, how do you feel? They're going to say great or good. And that's what we want to hear. But tell me more, right? If you're not familiar with the color wheel of emotions, have a look at that. That's a powerful tool that shows you the multitude of emotions that exist. Even as adults, so many of us are so unaware of just how many emotions exist. And it's okay to feel them, because even for you, till you can identify an emotion, how can you deal with it? And whether you admit it or not, those emotions exist within you, right? So just because you're choosing not to acknowledge, or you don't know that you're mad, or you're embarrassed, or there's shame, or there's frustration, or there's disappointment, doesn't mean it's going to go away. It's going to sit there and it's going to show up. So expanding our verbiage, right? So one of the things that, and this is something you can also do at home, or, when you're working with kids, one of the curriculum that I've developed for our preschool is every month there's an emotion that we focus on. And it's not just the generic ones. Like this month, we're doing calm. So every week we focus on the self-awareness of that emotion. Like, where do you feel it? Where in your body do you feel calm? What does it feel like? Getting them to be able to be more descriptive. The second week, we do the self-management, right? So, what can we do to feel calm? The third week, we do social awareness, which is how do we use this emotion to build relationships? And then we get into the last one, which is kind of practicing the verbiage that goes with it. So that is very, very important to realize, that emotions, that once we can kind of get into describing them, they also lose their power over us. So that's the color wheel part. When we talk about mad and sad, I want you to, the next time you see someone mad, I want you to tell yourself that they're actually just really sad. And just that simple shift will change how you view it. Because when we view someone as being mad, it puts us in our downstairs brain. We're either feeling afraid, we're getting reactive, we're getting fight or flight is getting triggered. But when we view someone as being sad, it changes, because we don't get mad with someone who's sad. We want to be empathetic, or we want to be compassionate, or we want to offer them something. So that is important. Knowing the difference between mad and sad, and treating those emotions as what they are. And just that shift, right? When you see a kid being really acting up, say, hey, what are you sad about? I see there's some sadness there. Tell me more, right? And another activity that really helps is, hey, I want you to. I work a lot with Play-Doh. I use it a lot in my workshops. I use it a lot as a tool. And whether it's CEOs or parents or teachers, it's just a very powerful tool, because it makes it all stick. Right? It really is malleable, and it shows you that there's so much that can be done. But one of the things I'll do is I'll be like, hey, here's Play-Doh. I want you to roll it like you're sad. And then I'll be like, now I want you to treat it like as if you were mad. And I'll probably even record it, and you can show them the difference in how they work. How they squish it up when they're mad, their face changes, the force changes, the energy changes. And then you show them when they're sad, it's calmer, it's slower, right? Because sadness is a slower emotion, whereas mad has a lot of speed. It has a lot of it's more intense. So let's switch up mad and sad. And then lastly, I want to share with you the 90-second technique. Okay, are you ready? The 90-second technique was something that was developed by a brain, I have a fancy term for those guys. anatomists. They study the brain. And this doctor came up with this theory that any emotion has a 90-second cycle. Meaning from the moment that you're frustrated or you're triggered, an emotion has 90 seconds of power. That's when you're being flooded with the neurochemicals that are getting into your body, the adrenaline, the cortisol, all that fun stuff. It's a 90-second cycle. At the end of those 90 seconds, though, something powerful happens. You have the power to choose whether you want to keep engaging with that emotion or whether you want to reset. Think about that. That means that we need to give ourselves that 90 seconds. Because in that 90 seconds, you're most likely going to be reactive, right? When someone cuts you in traffic, when you get an email, when your partner says something, when your child acts up, what is the immediate thing you want to do? You want to react because you're still in that 90-second period where that emotion is fresh. It is pumping through your bloodstream. Ugh, you're so mad. But give it 90 seconds and that emotion has kind of run its course. So how I have introduced that in when I do the EQ curriculum for parents and schools is giving timers, right? Those are really nice, colorful ones with the dripping of the colors, or you can do whatever, there's so many out there. But helping children develop a sense of what 90 seconds feels like. We say pause. We always say, hey, take a break. But how much of a break do I take? This helps them develop a sense of time, of what 90 seconds feel like in the body, right? So in the morning circle time, you can kind of, everyone's going to look at this timer as it's dripping color and just think about, I'm feeling calm, right? And developing activities that build in this 90 seconds. That 90-second pause is something I talk about in, with business leaders, as well as parents, as well as teenagers, as well as kids. Because if we can master that 90 seconds, we change the trajectory of our relationships. Relational health is the number one indicator of our overall well-being. And that kind of circles back full circle to what I started with initially. The essence of emotional intelligence is that we're learning tools to enjoy healthier relationships at both work, at home, academically. Children that are emotionally intelligent perform better academically. They are better socially. They end up showing that they're able to sustain careers longer. They're able to thrive in the outside world. But all of that happens, again, with that idea that we model it and we make it part of our conversations. We normalize it. You say, hey, today I was very frustrated when this happened. Oh, today I felt really sad when this happened. Normalize the talking of emotions. Once you normalize that, you can talk about things that you're doing, right? And now it's like, oh, it's no big deal. Oh, even grown-ups feel this thing. Oh, I'm not the only one. So normalizing it is really something that's in our hands, having enough conversations about it. And the 90-second technique is a game changer. Like I've had parents tell me that, just using it, even for a week, changes how you show up. Try it with your partner, try it at work, just make it a way of being, right? And normally, if this was an in-person one, I would give you Play-Doh and we would think of a time that we were triggered. We would literally, literally yesterday I did this where I saw adults tearing, rolling, slamming their Play-Doh, and then I would time it, and at 90 seconds, I'd be like, okay, tell me what you started with and tell me how you ended at 90 seconds. And you could tell that that emotion had, it had lowered its intensity. And then after that 90 seconds, we actively have a choice to create what we want. And you sculpt something that you want. Questions. I know I've been talking quite a bit, so I'm going to now open it up to questions and comments and kind of spend the last, few moments doing that.
Hi, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about like taking the 90 seconds and like repairing the relationship after an entire like behavior occurs, what is sorry if you hear all the background noise, I'm driving, but what is a good way to like take that time for yourself without leaving your child feeling like, I don't want to say feeling abandoned, but but feeling abandoned is kind of what I'm like, is kind of the wording that I'm using, because like I know sometimes like if I want to take that time and like go feel my emotions and then come back, then by time I'm ready to come back, my kid is like, no, they don't love me anymore, or something dramatic as like that. So I kinda like I just like, what is a good way to stop that cycle from happening, where I'm trying to take my time to come back as a better person and realize, and repair that relationship without, fully stepping away and leaving my child feeling like, okay, we're working through this together, and you're not leaving me to go figure this out.
So how old is your child?
She's 8.
8. Perfect. And so at 8, they're at that sweet age where obviously mommy not talking to me means a lot. I mean, it means a lot at any age, but at 8, they're like, what's up? What's up? But at the same time, that is where when you build a home in which we're normalizing emotions, you would say, hey, right now, like I'll say this, right? And I have a 7-year-old. Yeah, I'm feeling like I'm in my downstairs brain. So what do you think I can do to go in my upstairs brain? Include them in the process. That also really helps them. They'll be like, maybe I can give you a hug, maybe. Or you can say, yeah, you know what? Right now I'm just feeling I think I just need a break because I'm feeling a little frustrated. So use those words with them. I'm feeling a little frustrated, or I'm just feeling like, I just want to catch my breath. So I'm going to go and let them know what you're going to do, right? So I'm just going to go do this and I'll be back. And then let's catch up. You, in that moment, and even though it's hard because obviously you're feeling these emotions, you're walking them through what your steps are, because the unknown is what creates that anxiety in children. Like, mommy just left, mommy's taking her time, something wrong, is she mad at me, so we want to address that, but we're also showing them, we're modeling that I'm human. I maybe have not acted in the best, most mature way. So you know what, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, I'm going to go take a shower, okay, and then let's come back and then we can talk. Something like that. Or you know what, mommy's going to go for a quick walk to get back in her upstairs brain. Does that sound like something that might work for you?
It does. Thank you so much. That answered my question.
I'm glad. And I always say this in my when I do this stuff, that a lot of times I'll have teachers or parents be like, "Oh, you don't know my kid. This doesn't work with me." There is nothing that is going to work 100% all the time with every child. If it was, it would be a magic pill that we would all have bought long time ago. We're dealing with human beings that are unpredictable. They're developing, they're growing, they have their own struggles. The idea is, when you attending this shows that you're trying to add more tools to your toolkit. You're trying to think of ways that you can better yourself. That's really what it is. There's no sure shot way. This technique that I'm telling you might work one time, it might not work the 9 times after. That's okay. The key is that you have tools that you are working through, as opposed to just going off of your default, which most likely is going to be reactive. Any other questions? Come on, don't be shy. Any takeaways? I like to ask that too. Anything that you heard today or learned today that you feel you can start applying in how you're working with kids?
I think my biggest takeaway is actually the 90-second emotion process that you were talking about. I do know that a lot of the times, like with my child, for instance, she can feel a huge emotion in one like fell swoop, but
Mhm.
then after a while, and typically it's about 90 seconds, like she'll be right back in my arms, or something of that nature that will calm her back down, or choose something different in which she does. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway for me.
I'm glad. The 90-second rule, it sounds so simple, but I've actually seen it be a big hit, because it's like, wow, that's 90 seconds. I love using the phrase as well with kids. I'm like, hey, I think you're in your downstairs brain right now. I'm waiting for you upstairs. Just making it part of our vocab, right? And we're just normalizing that we're talking about feelings with just very honest, candid conversation. Any other takeaways?
I think that mine is that, and like, I'm going to say this wrong, but I'm going to fix it. That, like, I'm not weak for admitting I'm wrong. And I know that's just kind of like it's a tough viewpoint. It's like, well, I am a grown up. I should know better. I should do better. And it's like hard to admit that I was wrong, but it's okay because, you know, people are wrong sometimes.
Mm.
We admit it, take control of that kind of narrative. Like, yeah, I was wrong. Okay.
Mhm.
Let's move forward. Let's fix this. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to let kids know that as an adult, I am wrong.
And Anita, that's why I love the question that you asked about the repair, because that is so important. And it's something as parents, we don't know how to do. We feel like, well, I'm the adult, I shouldn't apologize, or they're wrong. And we run into this ego thing, but how are we expecting children to learn this skill if we don't demonstrate it? So it's very, very important. I also want to share with you guys that I have just recently had my book released called The Career Breakthrough Playbook, which is something that I've co-authored with 5 other experts. And it's really nice is that it's a no fluff. I talk about emotional intelligence in it, and basically very laser focused approach to what can you do in your life, because there's so much knowledge out there and it can be overwhelming. But in the book, it gives you these 6 critical skills for professional and personal success, I would say. It's available on Amazon, and it's #1 under new releases. So I'm excited about that. And I would also encourage you, I try to put out stuff like EQ hacks is what I call them. Simple, quick things that you're like, okay, I can do this. And that you can find on my Insta page, HT_compassion, which is, my emotional intelligence consulting firm. So I hope that you guys can learn something from it. And, if you have any questions, I would love to, even after something comes up, feel free to connect with me via my website or via Insta. And if there's no more for me, I'm going to turn it over to Miriam and let her kind of wrap up. Thank you so much for having me and, letting me speak to your wonderful audience.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming. And, that was a lot of really, really great information that I can use. And I don't have any kids, but I mean, I'm around kids all the time, but I also can use it just in regular life. There was one takeaway that I had that actually kind of hit me, and I was like, wait, I didn't even think about it that way. But the switch between mad and sad, like that was not. It seems like such a simple thing, but just switching the narrative and the perspective, it does really bring you from your downstairs brain to your upstairs brain. So I never thought about it that way, and I feel like when I'm working on de-escalation, even for myself or for somebody else, like that's definitely a tool that I will use. So thank you so much for all your knowledge, and I'm really looking forward to your book. I've already I haven't ordered it yet, but I have it pulled up on my Amazon.
Well, thank you so much. I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that it gives you, some solid takeaways.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
And if that's all, I know it's 8 o'clock for you guys, so I appreciate everyone who's logged in because I know it's dinner time and bedtime and all sorts of times. So thank you, very much, and thank you, Miriam, for organizing this. I look forward to more collaborations in the future, guys.
Of course, of course.